you brought up something that just blew me away. So you take it. You take it.
You know, Scott, AOC is not the only liberal left-wing politician who's been having some problems with crowds of people being unhappy at public meetings. And as we know, there have been many school boards where this has been happening. Parents are starting to discover what their kids are being taught in public schools, and they're not super happy about it. But this happened this is a story that I've been waiting for about 10 years now. Because I've been waiting to see something like this happen in a very public way. And it finally has, and that is that the presumed alliance between all non-white, non-Christian people in the entire country and the Democratic Party is now being put under strain. And it's being put under strain and we're seeing that publicly at a school board meeting in Dearborn, Michigan. Now, for those who don't know, Dearborn is one of the cities in the United States that has the highest concentration of Muslim Americans. In the United States. It's one of the highest concentrations. There's a lot of Arab Americans, and there's a lot of Muslims there. And so the Dearborn School District was having a list of pro-LGBTQ books with some explicit content that they were putting in the library. This is the favorite new parlor game of many of these sort of woke pro-LGBTQ gender ideology folks, is like, how many of these books can we slip in the high school library before the parents will notice? Well, on Friday, at a prominent local mosque, one of the imams said, this is a problem, this is sinful, we need to speak up about this. And so there was a massive protest at the school board meeting in Dearborn of Muslims showing up, holding up signs in English and Arabic talking about how this is sinful, and how this is shameful, and you shouldn't be indoctrinating our kids. With some of the slogans that people have said, only the evil religious right-wing Christians are saying this, like, all of a sudden the groomer thing is showing up, stop grooming our kids, right? That's showing up in English and Arabic, right? So they had to shut down the meeting because there was so much protest, and they tried to do the thing they did in Loudoun County, okay? So there's this assumption with this issue, with these gender issues, that, it's just a bunch of white Christians complaining about it. I guarantee you this story is not going to make it on the nightly news because it blows up the narrative of intersectionality, that all minority groups have the same oppression and that their oppression is shared. And so, the Muslims are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, we have deeply held religious beliefs that homosexuality is wrong, that it's sinful. In many Islamic legal texts, it's described as an abomination. The Old Testament penalties are not necessarily fully abrogated depending on which school of Sharia law you look at, or Islamic law, and they're not impressed. They're not taking it, and they are protesting about this. And what makes this a delicious irony, even more delicious, is that Dearborn was the political base of one Rashida Tlaib, who is a member of the Squad. And then another Squad member, Ilhan Omar, has a Muslim plurality district. So I would love to see someone in the media ask some of these Muslim, Keith Ellison, the Muslim Attorney General of Minnesota, some of these Muslim politicians who are on the left, who claim to be sincere and devout Muslims, how they feel about this woke ideology and this gender ideology being pushed on, to Muslim children. And then just see what happens. I'm very curious. Are they more left-wing or are they more devout Muslims? It would be really interesting to know the answer to that question.
And for those who may not remember, let's take a trip back in time after the 9/11 terror attacks.
Yep.
The Iraq war is in full swing. There's a whole lot of controversy going back and forth. Bush had already done his mission complete thing. And the Democrats decided to side themselves with all things Muslim.
Right.
Everywhere. There was, and there still is, the propagation of integrating Sharia law into British culture. Remember that?
Yeah.
And so there was just a profound support. And so Muslims were completely owned by the Democratic Party, or the Democratic Party just went into the Muslim culture. And they found acceptance there. And so seeing scenes like this, and we haven't played the video yet, is surprising whenever you think back where we were 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. But the LGBT thing is something that is divisive amongst Orthodox religions.
Yeah.
And so will the Democratic Party, how do they navigate this moving forward? Do they try to persuade Muslims to give up their orthodox beliefs? Or do they just say, to hell with the religion thing, all religion is bad, and start grouping them in with their traditional boogeyman, which is Christians?
Scott, whenever there's one thing that we can say reliably about the Democrats. Whenever there is a conflict between the traditional values of a minority group that they believe should vote lockstep for them, and the woke LGBTQ ideology that they are trying to push. Whenever there's a conflict between those two things, you can rely on the Democrats to spend a lot of time and energy messaging to that minority group about how Republicans hate them.
Okay.
And so that is probably what we can expect. They're just going to pretend that it's not an issue, and just do a full court press about a noun, a verb, and Republican Islamophobia.
As much as I want to say that you're wrong, I think you are right. That is exactly what will happen, because we've seen this play out over and over again.
Right.
The Democrats introduce policy that negatively impacts people, such as things that help move manufacturing over to China, things that increase inflation, things that open borders, hurts people
right.
in many different ways across the political spectrum. But instead of voting in ways that are good long term, which conservatism, I believe, is really that's one of the key focuses. Is like, okay, what decisions are we making right now that are going to and how, what's the impact years down the road? And they're just going to say that conservatives hate a bunch of people,
right?
Which we don't. We just don't. And I've seen this tactic play out over the course of my life successfully, and so yeah, Democrats can. You can bet that Democrats will do that. But do you mind if we play that video? Because we didn't take the time to show what I showed the article while you were talking, but not the video.
Let's do
because it is pretty significant how passionate Muslims are in regards to this. And frankly, it's not something that we're really seeing come from the Protestant church, in my opinion. Here you go. So for those who are listening, you see just a crowd of people moving around, shaking the fists, shout, and this is at a school board meeting. And it looks like they completely disrupted the meeting. And according to the article, they had signs that said "Keep your books in the closet," things of that nature.
Yeah,
So,
I just hope that this is something that starts to get more attention, and I do think that look, here's what I will say as a Republican, as somebody who is a Christian conservative. I teach at a Christian conservative university. I teach political Islam at a Christian conservative. I teach about political Islam at a Christian conservative university from a Christian worldview. Are we going to agree with Muslims on everything? No. No. And thank God we have a country at the First Amendment where we don't have to. We can try to convert them. They can try to convert us. That's how the First Amendment works. I think Christianity is right, so I think we're going to have more success than them. But that's how it works. But there are some things that we can all agree on. And one thing that we can all agree on is let's not sexualize kids. That seems like a pretty easy, straight down the line. We're not talking about adults here. We're not talking about any of the LGBTQ issues like once people are turning 18. But we don't necessarily need to sexualize children. I think there's probably a lot of people who are in the LGBTQ community who are more conservative on this issue as well. Probably would be afraid to say anything because of the mob coming after them. But I think there's probably a decent number of folks even there who would agree with us.
There have been LGBT groups that have been canceled by big tech social media platforms because they come out against this type of education, if you want to call it that. I call it indoctrination for children.
Right.
And there was an article that came out that talked about the teacher shortage here in America because apparently it's reaching catastrophic levels. In fact, there are some school districts, based on an article I read, that are having to hire undergraduate students who are still in school to teach in elementary school classes. I mean, it's just that bad. And one of the questions that was asked, I believe, of the guy who runs all of the education, I forgot his name. I wish I was more prepared. This is kind of off the cuff. But he said that the reason why there is a teacher shortage is because there's a lack of respect for teachers and they're not paid enough. And he went on to finish his comment saying, because teachers are not able to talk about LGBT issues.
What?
Do you remember going to school, right, at grade school? You didn't even know if the teacher was married.
Right.
And if you did know, all you knew was his last name. He was Mr.
Right.
What's and what. You didn't know his first name. You didn't know anything about the life of the teacher outside of the classroom. And it is this woke thing where teachers are using their classroom not to teach education, not to teach them how to read and write and think critically. It's to espouse far leftist ideology. And parents, as a parent, we do not want that. I do not want that. Maybe there are some parents that don't care, but as far as Dearborn, Michigan goes, that is a very high concentration of Muslims in that area. So it is not surprising that they would rise up. And honestly, the amount, based on the clip that was shown, it was packed. It was packed more than what I've seen at other school board meetings that have made their rounds. But this idea of of protesting and making your voice heard at school board meetings, I don't think is over by a long shot.
Oh, no.
I think that the pressure needs to continue with school boards to get the conversation back to education and to stop with the sexualizing of children, especially the kindergarten to third grade, which is part of the bill that was introduced, or the law that was enacted in Florida, which specifically said you cannot talk about sexual topics with kids that are as young as 5.
Yeah.
To 8.
And you know, in 2024, if Republicans suddenly win the Muslim vote, which in 2000 George W. Bush did, by the way, narrowly.
He did.
Yes, he did. He did. But if in
my mind that seems impossible, just from what I've seen in the media.
Social conservative, they tend to be socially conservative, and they tend to also, a lot of Muslim folks are immigrants who like to, come over here and start businesses. And so there's a bit of the free market component there too. It was, there were a lot of the stuff in the war on terrorism, I think, blunted that. And it's far from monolithic. I mean, the Muslim community in America is not monolithic, but they are very traditionalistic. I mean, it's especially if they're devout, if they're practicing, right? So if Muslims suddenly are won by Republicans in 2024, we can look back on this moment and say this is where it started.
I love it. I hope you're right. I honestly do hope you're right. So talking about moments that are historic, we seem to continuously have historic